Welcome all to this fabulous show today at Sattology. We are talking about some medieval Indian history which has been misrepresented over the period of time. It has been covered in my first book, Sattology Debunking Mythology. And I may not, being an author, you have to be humble. So I do not claim that I know everything or I covered everything. But there are many, many other writers who have done equally good research. And one such writer you have already seen, and he has a very successful publication. He has come on our show 2 times, and he has kindly agreed to speak on the topic today on this particular version, where we want to present the Indian medieval history with facts. So, one question is Islamic invasion, did that invasion produce economic bounties for India or not? If you look at Wikipedia or other sources, then there is a lot of fake news going on that the Islamic rule produced economic advantage for India. I covered in my first book, it didn't. In fact, India became poorer. So now let us discuss with this author, and you can make your own mind with that. So without delay, introducing you again, Shri Abbas Maldiar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. So, Abbas ji, welcome again. And you have so much wealth of research you do to produce your books. So, thank you
Thank you.
so much. So, you heard my introduction, and where do you think that this misinformation about, see, the one thing people have, India and Europe and even US, has debunked the British colonial theory completely. The British did not produce economic bounty for all any locals, whether it's India or US. US and India were both under British at one time. So where does this originate, first of all? The theory that Islamic invasion was actually beneficial for the people who were conquered.
So, interestingly, the first source which everyone would like to go for to study any subject is happens to be Wikipedia, right or wrong. That is the first source for anyone most of the times. Eventually, even while going through the Wikipedia pages, people don't try to go through the sources which have been quoted or mentioned in. So when we look for the references, like whether Islamic invasions or any invasion for that matter made India richer or not, then one of the source which interestingly comes out would be some kind of article, whether published in Economic Times, Business Standard, or many other magazines or journals. Now, once one starts going into the articles and the write-ups of those magazines, they'll find that all the articles are kind of quoting one single source beautifully. And that single source is Angus Madison's work, which is the contour of world economy right from 180 to 2030 AD. So that becomes very interesting because everyone is trying to quote that book, but the moment you look into the book itself, then the data and the jargons what Mr. Madison has put across is completely different from what the articles have been claiming. So if I just straight away start up with the jargon or the tables which Angus Madison has put across, rather than going into the complete analysis part of it, which is put across in the first half of the book. So the table, there's one very important table which talks about the GDP share of each and every countries or the major countries from 180 to 2030. Now, if one starts looking into the numbers for India, India is most glorious between 180 to 1080. It is 32.4% GDP share. First depletion has been found to occur in 1500 AD, where it reads out to be 24.4%. Now, Mughals came to India in 1526, and the Islamic invasion has somehow started happening in India at around 8th century, when Qasim for the first time came onto the borders of Sindh. So Now you look at the numbers from 180, from 32.4% to 24.4. So almost 9% drop has already happened in 10 years. Now, if further one looks even into the Marxist history or the history which has been propagated by the leftist or so-called leftist people, then they also acknowledge in their book that Gupta period was one of the most glorious one. So definitely till before the Islamic invasion, yes, India was very rich, and somehow this 32.4% has to come with the Gupta Empire, and beyond that, it kind of started crashing because obviously the loots were being taken. Now, the biggest myth, what is put across is that okay, every other invader somehow invaded and got back to their land, but there was one kind of invader or one kind of empire which came to make rich India richer. So that empire, which I will like to concentrate upon, is the Mughal Empire, which everyone you will find every academician talking about. Yes, Mughals did good. They were not as barbaric. They were very secular, and of all, they were very progressive, and they wanted their nation, India, to progress too. Now, our GDP share, as per Angus Madison, got below China drastically for the first time in 1600 AD. Interestingly, the ruler of India or the Mughal Sultanate that time, which was ruling India, was the great Akbar the Great himself, who is considered to be the biggest economic reformist and the secularist. So, in the time of Akbar, our GDP share for the first time depleted below China. Now, if further one goes into looking into the jargons, there is one important table which further is stated by Angus Madison, that is GDP growth per capita. That is also very interesting because GDP per capita kind of speaks of that how the subjects of the people of that particular country are growing. What is their economic growth? The table states that from 1500 AD to 1820 AD, our GDP per capita growth was negative. It never ever happened before in Indian history, which speaks of that if at all say that a bit of GDP share was increasing for the Sultanate or the country, India that time, GDP per capita was depleting, which means that while the banks of those people were being built up, the banks of our people, that is the peasants and the workers and everyone who was working for the Sultanate or the general subjects, was depleting day by day. This can be further substantiated by other sources, which we can discuss further upon. So in terms of numbers, it is very well proven that yes, the most glorious Islamic invaders, I will say the most glorious Islamic invaders because they are most glorified. The Mughals did not make India richer as per the statistics put by Angus Madison, the author, even whom the leftist or the other side of the people, the Mughal fan club, is being quoting continuously.
No, very good points. But one thing caught my attention. You mentioned that there is a public perception that they were not as barbaric.
Yeah.
So being barbaric is acceptable and not as barbaric. So what do you actually mean? Why do people think like that? Isn't that funny?
For in my perception, Mughals were equally barbaric as the other invaders were. As per the leftist historian or the historian from the other side or from the Mughal fan club, as I'm very fond of calling them Mughal fan club, they kind of state that okay, other invaders were barbaric, but these people were not too barbaric. But the sources or the primary sources which come up front, the account of the people who visited their court, is something very different. It
But
speaks a lot of the barbaric nature of even Akbar, the most secular king.
yes.
If I have to believe the work of James Todd has been quoted in one of a very famous book. I am just missing the name of the book. So he says that Akbar once to count the amount of massacres what he had done. He counted by weighing the Yagupavit or the Janeu. Janeu is a sacred thread what the Brahmins in India wear. So it weighed to around 200 kg. So if one thin thread is weighing so much, just imagine the kind of massacre, the amount of massacre Akbar had done. So what can be more brutal than this? That you have killed the people whose Janeu were amounting to 200 kg. It was a massive number. So we don't have exact account of the people how many he had killed, but the number is speaking aloud for itself. The number, the count of the weight of the Janu itself says that, kind of states that the number wouldn't have been less than 500,000 or so, if it has to be believed.
Actually, Lord Macaulay gave the report to the British Parliament, and he said that the Hindus were the mouse and the Mughals were the cat. So
Yes,
that was the comparison between the two communities, and
yes,
many Hindus may not like it, but that was the report he gave to the British Parliament, and said that he also said a passing remark on Hindus that I have no idea that whether they are weak or meek, but why they can't defend themselves when they are in the majority.
yes,
So, so this was a comment he made to the British Parliament. Now, coming back to the same topic, facts versus fiction, especially of the economic impact. So, during the you stated very commonly available facts, and people can verify also. But there is a one particular, the Bengal, where Islam reached in 717 AD. 717 it reached there, and they started spreading through opening mosques. And
yes,
because the mosque was the main reason, Bengal was a Vaishnav country completely.
yes,
So during the last 1200 years, they have converted from being a Vaishnav country to almost totally Islamic now. Is going the
yeah,
Pakistan way. But
yeah,
somehow in recent times we have seen their economy is growing. I think Bangladesh has become more prosperous than even Pakistan today.
yes.
So what is the reason of that growth in Bangladesh? I'm sorry, I'm just putting totally
No,
off.
no. So the way the Bangladesh operates, or they have been operating of late, is very much different from many other Islamic nations. And if I just put the things very much in perspective, if we look at the Islamic growth of other other countries apart from Pakistan, then the facts are very different. Like, who can claim to be more Islamic than UAE for that matter? And if I look at the condition of UAE and the condition of Pakistan, then those are completely poles apart. One cannot even make the comparison. If one looks at Bangladesh on a contrast, yes, it has to be acknowledged that there are a lot of atrocities against the minorities even in Bangladesh. But
Yes.
apart from that, yeah, and that's why it relates to our CAA also. But if one looks at the steps what they have been taking, they have been quite progressive in nature in terms of how to grow the economy. They have not been caught up with a lot of Sharia laws, which kind of Pakistan tries to impose in their whole system completely. So for me, Bangladesh, Pakistan has been an exact contrast, though they're sprouted out of the same root. Yes, India first split into East and West with Pakistan, and then Pakistan further split into gone on to become Bangladesh. But Bangladesh bloomed, but it blemished. Pakistan blemished. So it was more of a stress on the progress than Sharia or the Islamic laws, which helped Bangladesh to get out of the clutches of the dogmas, and it helped them to grow more.
No, the UAE is successful because their entire Arabic leadership is Western educated,
Yes,
and they are it's a capitalistic economy, and they have done very smart things like no taxes, which Dr. Subramanian Swamy also has said about India, that there should be no taxes for India,
yes,
and that's how the economy is. So it's become a spend economy, and people can retain. And the second reason why UAE has been successful is that a lot of Indian origin professionals run their economy.
yes,
So to somewhat say the races, so their top level is Arab, then Europeans, and then Indians, and the rest of the South Asian community comes much lower, which includes Pakistan and Bangladesh. Now, as far
yes,
as Bangladesh goes, why I asked you this question, that it is, in my opinion, that's a temporary growth. It's about to crash because so far the richest businesses have been run by the smartness of the Hindu businessmen so far. But gradually, as they're acquiring all those factories and closing it down and removing Hindus from the key positions, I'm sure Bangladesh will be in a bad condition in few years. Not now, but not few, but they can't grow much. That is given the
Yes.
fact. So what is in that? What is in the culture that destroys freedom and that destroys economy? What have you identified?
For me, because it's their obedience ultimately is all about the ummah, and they don't even think of, see, any country needs to will progress only if there's a concept of nationhood exists for someone. What I have seen from most of the Islamic state, whichever you pick, they have been very much confined to the concept of ummah, where it's all about the the idea that it's gonna be spread with Islamic Brotherhood. It is to be more about the Islamic community-based nationhood than the border-based nationhood. And at times, this kind of ideas kind of suffocates the notion to grow the nation itself. And what we are seeing in India right now is completely the replica of what this idea of supporting the ummah is supposed to be like. So, in the fair amount of time, as you are saying that Bangladesh economy will start crashing, it will apparently happen because it will be again that they will come back to the idea that Ummah is a priority and it's not a nationhood. They will again vouch for any other radical Islamic idea which will be sprouting in other parts, than to see that yes, my nation needs to grow, because they are not even thinking with the notion that I need to make my nation grow, nation move ahead. It's always about that the Islamic community or the Ummah, as we call it, needs to grow up. So until unless that notion is completely weeded out, they cannot grow at a holistical level.
No, I totally agree with you. So if you look at the 57 Islamic states, only 10 or 15 are well off, and that too because of the oil, and that oil is bought by the Western countries. If we in
Yes,
the US stop buying their oil, then there's nothing left. So today,
yes,
United States is the largest oil producer. It has replaced
yes,
Saudi Arabia or Russia or anything else. The gas prices have gone down completely. And the
yes,
people who are in trouble are Russia, Saudi Arabia, and many other countries, Qatar. But of all these Arabic countries, the worst has been Qatar. It's a small country which hardly nobody knows, but people don't
mhm,
know that Al Jazeera comes from there.
yeah,
And then you have Al Jazeera comes. Doha is in Qatar, so that's the same place. Al Jazeera comes from there. Most of the universities and the leftist organizations in the US are funded by them. And
yes,
soccer World Cup, God knows when that will happen. But if it happens ever in that country, it's like indirectly supporting something which is against the free economic principles. And that is the
yes,
biggest source of funder today. And even to such an extent that even Saudi is against them. That's international dynamics. Saudis
yeah,
want to bomb them out any day if they get a chance. They're because right now US is protecting both of them
yes,
against each other also. So now this is the international dynamics outside of India. But this affects India in a big way because Indian Muslims are totally different breed than any other Muslims of the planet. They are
yes,
somehow become living in a land of dharma. They have become more ultra Arabic than even Arabic themselves.
yes,
So how do they import such kind of fanaticism? Because it's not existing anywhere. When you
yeah,
ask Arabs, when you tell them this is what Indian Muslims are doing, many of them say they're crazy. So this is the American Muslims talking about Indian Muslims. They're crazy because American Muslims, if you find them, they'll be engaged in all non-Sharia compliant activities. So
yeah.
whatever they stand for, they are totally reverse of that. And so, why have they become so special?
One very critical aspect which I have analyzed or understood is that there's one thing called the self guilt, which at times drives you crazy for most of the things, and you go fanatic towards the idea so strongly that you want to watch or prove that the thing what happened in the past was very apt one. So, like how Ambedkar has himself quoted, his book Pakistan or Partition of India is a very interesting piece to read. And where in the chapter National Frustration, he clearly says that he's first spoken about Darul Islam, and then he goes on to speak about that Islam will not allow a true Muslim to ever adopt India as the motherland and consider Hindu as his own kith and kin. So it was a complete analysis of the whole Muslim project which existed in India by then, who was seeking a partition out of India. So what he had also analyzed and felt that India is the land which should give them the maximum of freedom, we should give them maximum of cognizance where they can live freely. Despite that, they went on to support the Khilafat movement, which was of none of their business, but they just jumped into it. And International Congress also went on to support it. So that story is still continuing, and they are still living in a denial mode that our ancestors too were Hindus, and it's getting very tough for them to digest the fact that something went wrong in the past. They are not even acknowledging it, and when you fail to acknowledge such facts, you become more and more radical because you are trying to day and night to prove that no, nothing wrong had happened. If someone goes on to say that Khalji, uh, it's okay that Bakhtiyar Khilji might have destroyed Nalanda, but Alauddin Khilji was somewhat different, though Alauddin Khilji had its own different colors. If someone goes on to defend it, it speaks aloud that you are hell bent to defend a marauder. It means though Khalji doesn't represent the Muslims or Mughals don't represent the Muslims, there is something of the past which is carrying so much with you that you are just living in a denial mode, not ready to accept of the wrong that happened in the past.
No, absolutely right. Because the deniability is the biggest deniability today is that the religion of peace. Like we are a religion of peace, where throughout the
Yeah,
history nobody has seen peace, especially in their communities. Even the
yeah,
57 Islamic countries, including Saudi Arabia, are like a it's like an explosion in their society every day. It's like
yeah,
I don't know PIEC how do you spell it or PEAC you spell it. Which spelling you use, people don't know. So this is the biggest fraud, and especially Americans' view is that India is such a wonderful country. Majority of India is such a wonderful. You have beautiful temples. India is known for temples.
yeah,
India is known for Rishikesh, Ganga, and all these things. This is what the world recognizes India for: yoga, meditation.
yeah,
The so they them following a philosophy of the Middle East doesn't help India, because India's identity is completely different. India
yeah,
is the home of Buddhism and India is the home of Hinduism,
yeah,
Sikhism, Jainism.
yeah,
India is not the home of Islamic. Islam's home is Saudi Arabia
yeah,
or that religion. So this is not. So the Western society identifies India with totally different thing. So within India, the movement that is going on doesn't make any sense. Neither it has got economic advantage, nor it has got any political advantage, nor it has got any social integration. So the entire thing is like a rebel against the majority. So it's a rebellion against the majority on one pretext or the other. Do you think that you have a solution, or you can say a solution, that how do we stop the rebellion? Because this is all rebellion. They want to, in the past, they call it Khilafat movement.
yes,
It's the same thing going on against the rest of the Hindus now. And
yeah,
they claim victimhood when anybody stands for themselves. If we
yes,
defend ourselves, so their idea is nobody should defend also, they should just give up.
yes.
And that's what they're trying everywhere else. Islamophobia is a word to silence people. Everywhere they want to, nobody should defend, they can attack. So do you think we have a solution for this?
The first, as you said, that they really feel very petrified when someone tried to oppose that you cannot go against something. Like when there was a lot of opposition against CAA, what it really translated to, it meant that they were so irritated with the fact that Hindus or the other minorities will now be getting protection in the other land, because the act had nothing to do with the Muslims of India.
Correct.
Act had nothing to do with, for that matter, it had nothing to do with anyone who is Indian at all. It was all about Pakistanis or Bangladeshis or the Afghanistanis. Despite that, they make a whole great ruckus out of it. So it really gives a lot of reinforcement to what you stated right now. Now, coming back to the solution part of it, I do come from a background of being a Marxist once upon a time. I dwelled into communism, where I felt that all those things like Gajwaye Hind, Jihad, and all these terms are just kind of myth and the fiction which have been fed into our mind by so-called Hindutva gang. But once I started getting exposed to it, the things started opening up in a, this showed a very different angle or different facade just started coming up across me. I do analyze and felt that the kind of movement, what had happened in Russia, in French Revolution, that kind of revolution is what is needed among the whole Islamic society, where the monarchs are sitting on the top, trying to send out the packets of jihad or the opium out to you, and now the oppressed one are the one who are gonna be the stone pelters or who are gonna become the fidayeen. Like if Sharjil Imam will at max be going to an IITian Sharjil Imam, let's call him IITian, will at max be going to deliver a speech, but he will not be becoming a fidayeen. On contrast, one who is the deprived one will be used for the purpose of being fidayeen to build the stone. Now this whole construct needs to be brought down to the fact that a very large scale revolution comes up where the oppressed one really analyze that, you know, their rights are being taken away, their human rights are in doldrum, it's nowhere, their educational rights are being snatched away by the monarchs or the master jihadis who are kind of looking to perpetrate the idea of the mythical jihad all around, that if you do this then something will happen and you will go to Jannat and all those kind of rubbish ideas. Until unless this revolution pops up or this happens, this thing cannot end up, because this had to end through the Muslims themselves. Whatever we may try, we will keep on seeing the fidains, we will keep on seeing the radical Islamic attack coming upon us. It will be the society itself which needs to come up to become the rebellion against the right one, who are the monarchs, who are the masters of jihad, rather than waging a jihad against America or India or any other nation for that matter.
So there is another the one logic is that one logic that we often hear on especially from them is that there is a there is no violence. They don't acknowledge any violence done by their community. They don't acknowledge anything which is done in their community. It's worldwide, whether it's in USA or India or anywhere else. To such an extent that they say anyone who kills others is not a Muslim also. They say that. But for us, being a non-Muslim or other community, for us it doesn't matter, because when we see everyone taking the name of the same person, Allah, and talking about it, so we can't distinguish who is good or bad. So we don't know who is going to explode next. And so for us, it's very difficult. You're saying something? Yes. So for us, it's very difficult.
So I completely understand what. It's definitely going to be. Rather, I see it as a big challenge upon us, because this is a very complex scenario where in a so-called secular country like India, where the democracy or the constitution give various rights, and we are not even as barbaric as China, that the way they treated the Muslims over there, we can't even do that. But the fact being that yes, the problems are existing. We are facing the heat of the jihad every day. We need some very serious solution. Long back, if everyone remembers, Sitaram Goel had come up this idea of eradicating the parts of the holy book itself, which causes a lot of confusion, leaves a lot of ambiguity, and then people use it at a base reference. Like when Osama bin Laden waged jihad upon America, he quoted the verses from the holy book itself. So the terrorists are very actively quoting those words. So if those words, the verses itself can be eradicated, then the kind of at one level you have sorted the problem to a great extent. There should not be doctrine which remains to be known as a base for why you did particular jihad or the war or something like that. There should not be any base reference or a sanction coming out from a community. It should not, there should be zero sanction for it from the community.
In fact, China, what the modification that they did for the Quran in the Quran is there are 420 times references
Yes.
of the word kafir in Quran. And I also recommended in my book that you should
Yeah.
remove the word kafir. I had no idea that China has done the same. So I had not read Chinese version. But what I have
Yeah.
seen and what my friends have told me, they have removed any reference to the word kafir in Chinese Quran. There's no word kafir. And they made changes that the Communist Party is a
Yeah.
representative of their God. So these two changes they have done. And so
Yeah.
they completely defanged Islam in
Yes.
many ways. So in other parts of world, especially for India,
Yes.
I always say that they have to confirm their scripture because their scripture is coming from outside India. Even Bible is from outside India, and even Judaism.
Yeah.
They have to confirm
Yeah.
with the local culture of India. They cannot introduce a new culture. So they have to
Right.
become homogenized or
Yes.
Indianized before they are being taught in India. So they have to be complete. They cannot
Yeah.
go against Bhagavad Gita,
Yes.
against Krishna, or against Ram in any way. And if that happens, and also the
Yes.
second solution is the law of reciprocity, that whatever laws Hindus are subject in their countries, the same laws they will be subject in India. So when this is applied, then
Yeah.
the fanaticism will disappear. What do you say on this?
Yeah. It will. Yeah. It will cease out completely because the it is a very, it would be very illogical construct to even think that there won't be other religions living around. They have happened and they will live for long. The only constructive idea would be, yes, do the correction, do the amendments, bring in the laws which makes the thing not go haywire, and there is no support as far as from the religious side of it, which will happen only through these amendments or the modifications or revisions which you're talking about.
So, Abhajit, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful discussion. And we are going to continue next week on some
My
other
pleasure.
topic. And it's always a pleasure to have you. Viewers, keep watching this show.
Thank
Follow
you. Thanks a lot.
Abbas Maldayar on Twitter and Facebook, and he has his own channel as well. So do subscribe to that channel and keep watching us on Sattology. A lot more is coming up, a lot more. And in my next discussion, we are going to cover the calculation of time, with a very, very prominent author, and including my own research on the calculation of time from the Vedic perspective. Thank you so much. And Namaskar, Abhasi.
Namaskar.